You are watching me, Dirty Dutch Mantell, right here on Sportskeeda Wrestling.
So one of the great joys of my career as the content manager for Sportskeeda Wrestling is getting a chance to pick this man's brain. Some recognize him as one of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time. Others as a prolific manager for wrestlers such as Jack Swagger and Alberto Del Rio. But most people universally, they know him as one of the best minds in the business. How do you do, Dirty Dutch Mantell?
I'm doing very well this morning. I had to get up early for this. I usually don't get up this early, but if I'm a little slow, I'm still sluggish. So let's continue.
Amazing. So remember, guys, Dirty Dutch Mantell will pick his favorites from this year's nominees, but you get to choose as well. Just log into the link mentioned in the description and you get a chance to win a lot of exciting prizes. Some of you will get a chance to chat with Rob Van Dam. Some of you will get to win exciting prizes like video games and so much more. So let's dive right into everything. So, sir, you are a part of our eminent panel here at Sportskeeda Wrestling. We know that you review both WWE and AEW every week. Which one do you personally prefer when it comes to reviewing both products?
Well, production-wise, from a production standpoint, of course, WWE is so much better. AEW kind of wings it, but I kind of like that too, because it gives the appearance of the older wrestling territories that we used to have that we don't have anymore. And WWE, I don't care who you are, it is so very predictable. AEW is not as predictable because you don't know what they do change their stuff up. But WWE, while the production is great, it's a network production. But you always know they're going to open with the in-ring interview for 15 minutes. And you can almost write down the time that the interview is going to last. Usually it's 15 minutes or 16 minutes past the hour. And, I asked one time, I said, why does this first segment go so long? They said, well, and it did make sense. Let's interest the fans into what's coming up and what's going to happen. So you can't do it in 10 minutes or whatever. But so they stretch it out to 15 minutes. And some of their opening, I call it monologues. Comedians do it too. Late night talk show hosts do it too. But some of the greatest interviews I've ever heard, and this was years ago, but it was done in that opening monologue by The Rock, by Stone Cold, by whoever there was talking. But they interested you in the rest of the show and kept you tuned in. But in AEW, they do different things like they keep the wrestling in picture, match in picture while they do an advertisement, which I find that you don't lose anything. The only thing that I don't like about AEW is their 4-man announce booth, because it just wears you out. Have you ever seen the old British wrestling televised? They had one announcer.
Yeah.
They had one announcer, and he didn't talk incessantly. He said he would say something and then let that sink in. He'd let it lay there a minute, then he'd do something else. But here they're constantly going. So I think it's the only thing AEW, I think if they cut their announce booth down and do less talking, it'd even be a better show. But I like both. I like both brands.
Amazing. You were a big part of TNA for so many years. Do you think AEW has the financial backing that maybe TNA did not, and it could go up against the giants that are WWE?
Well, it can go up against WWE, but I think right now they're at almost their peak. I hate to say that, but wrestling viewership in the last 10 years, and it's steadily dropping. And then now it's not all wrestling's fault. because people have so much else to occupy their time. Now, if you're going on live viewership, I don't even know if you can go on that anymore, because you can always go back and catch it on Rewind or whatever you can find it somewhere else. So it's not necessary to watch the program live, but you can catch it later. So, and they have ways to determine that, but the viewership has dropped. When was WCW and WWF? When were they head to head? Back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, so 97.
80s?
No, 97 to 2001, I think.
Okay.
That's when the Monday night thing was happening.
If you combine both audiences, and they was overlay, people were going back and forth and shifting, but they had like 8 to 9 million people watching those broadcasts, which they had a huge audience. Wrestling doesn't have that huge audience like that anymore. And I don't know, and my theory on it is there's too much on. And the people are too, they know too much about the inner workings of the business. So if you told me baseball they knew who was going to win before they played the game, well, why would I watch it? I'm not going to watch it. Or if you told me soccer they know who's going to win, I wouldn't watch it. So I think letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak, or the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in. But one thing you can do is tell a good story, because storytelling never dies. I don't care if you watch a movie, and you've seen classic movies, and you know how it ends, but you still like to watch it because you enjoyed the movie. But I think, all what they call the dirt sheets, they just know too much, and they rely too much on rumors. I put out a rumor one time that, I remember what it was. I was bored on Twitter one day, and I put up there, rumors have it through Stanford that WWE is being sold to Disney. More details later. And they took it and they ran with it. And I just made it up. So just imagine the things you can make up, and people accept what he said it, so it must be true. Of course, I've never really owned up to that on Twitter. I'm just owning up to it now, but I think most people knew that anyway. But I think they concentrate too much on rumors and nothing on fact. But if you relied on fact, you would never get anything out of Stanford, because who knows what Vince says? A lot of people care, but nobody knows what he says. So that's the way I look at it.
You have worked there, and we have only heard stories about how chaotic it is back there. So are the stories true? Is it really that chaotic on show day?
Can be. Because the writers, they're writing for an audience of one. That's who they're writing for. They're not writing for Wichita, Kansas, or they're not Oakland, California, or Atlanta, or Tampa, they're writing for the audience of one. And when you go in, and when I used to go in, I was supposed to show up at 2:00. I'm always been fairly on time, but you could actually feel the vibe when you walk in. I've always been able to do that, because you could almost decide, and I think in the first 2 or 3 minutes, what kind of mood Vince is in. Now, Vince was in a good mood if you walk by the writer room and they're all going, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. They're happy because Vince is not on a tirade. But when you walk in and they're like this, oh my God, Vince is going to fire. He's raising hell. And I've been there several times where, the sheets come out about, I don't know, the lineup comes out about 4:00. And you got 2 hours live to do. And your agents are waiting, and the talent is waiting, the referees are waiting, and everybody's waiting to see because they haven't released it yet. And then it can go past that. And then finally the word circulates is that they're back in the back and they're just rewriting everything. So they took a show that should have been completed maybe 5 days earlier, and they're still writing it and changing everything. And that's happened 2 or 3 times. So, and the show, but you couldn't tell it by watching it because the talent is experienced enough to go out there, and it doesn't matter when it was written. They're still going to perform as good as they would have performed on the original plan. So a lot of things get changed, and sometimes things get changed on the spur of the moment. Let me give you an example of that. It was Swagger and Cesaro. They were in a match somewhere. I mean, I can't tell you where because all these arenas run together, but they were in the match. And the finish was that the Cesaro and Jack were going to go over. So I'm watching, and all of a sudden I see a completely different finish. And I went, well, what the hell happened, guys? And Jack told me, he said, well, Vince changed his mind halfway through the match. Really? And that's how it ended. So when you say spur of the moment, you couldn't get more spur of the moment than Vince changing the outcome about halfway through.
Absolutely.
And I stood out. Now I'm like a fan. Now I'm going, what the hell? And of course they didn't get me on camera, but it's been known to happen. I don't know if it's happened to anybody else, but it happened to us.
We have heard stories of it happening several times. In any case, let's dive right into the awards. You spoke about the importance of storytelling. So what, in your opinion, Dutch Mantell, is the best feud of the year 2021? Was it CM Punk versus MJF? Was it Kenny Omega versus Hangman Adam Page? Was it Roman Reigns versus John Cena? Was it Seth Rollins versus Edge? Or was it Hikaru Shida versus Serena Deeb from AEW?
Well, I don't even know Serena Deeb, so I just heard the name. But I think the best story, and a lot of AEW before I started watching them, but I think Roman Reigns and John Cena had a great story being told. But they told the story of history, and all the fans could go back. See, I think that's one thing that bookers forget, is that fans never forget. They can tell you what happened 6 months ago and why it happened if the story is told correctly. But I'm going to have to go with the WWE stories here. I think it was Cena and Roman. And what was that other one you told me? I got it right here.
Seth Rollins and Edge.
And they told a good one too. And it was because they had history between themselves. So they capitalized on the history. Unless you do that, sometimes things just never take off. But when you have history to push it, to punch it, you got a good story. So I have to go with the WWE stories on this, and I would go with Cena and Roman Reigns.
So you have been a part of WWE for so many years, and you have seen so many top guys come and go. What do you think of Roman Reigns as the current face of the company, and how does he maybe measure up to somebody like, Flair or Hogan from back in the day?
He'll never get there.
Okay.
He'll never rise to that level of status. And let me tell you what, one of the things that people never mention when they talk about Hulk Hogan. Why was Hulk Hogan over so much? And I can ask you this question. How many times have you ever seen Hogan on TV for free?
Not very often.
Right. Because they kept him away He'd do an interview, but when he wrestled, it was something special, and you didn't see him wrestle that much. So if you wanted to see him, you'd have to buy a ticket to go watch him. Now, of course, it changed with The Rock, and it changed with Stone Cold, and it changed with the Undertaker. But Roman Reigns, he'll never reach that stratosphere of Hulk. And now I think John Cena has, and I think Austin has, and The Rock has, and The Undertaker has. But Roman Reigns, he's just a different character. And you can look at how long they took to get him over. He's still getting over, really. But the longer it takes to get somebody over, if they don't go crazy, it takes longer to fall. So that's just a rule of thumb that bookers use and you can't do anything stupid with him, because that would kill him, because he's a thinking wrestler, and he's very good on promos, but he had Paul Heyman with him, and that helped tremendously. So there's my answer. There's my answer with something else that I just added in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate you for that. You mentioned The Undertaker. We know he's going into the WWE Hall of Fame. Is there someone from today's generation that reminds you of The Undertaker?
You talking about the gimmick, or just a guy that reminds me?
The guy.
Well, not right offhand. I can't think of anybody. But The Undertaker, I kind of broke him into the business. I didn't break him in, but I booked him, I think, in his first territory. I was booking in Memphis, and I took over and he was coming in. I may not have been the one to book him. Great talent. And somebody asked me one time, he said, did you ever think that Mark Calloway, which is his name, you think he would ever be the star that he is today? And I said, well, no, I don't think anybody saw that. But one thing about him, he is a great athlete, great basketball player. To be 6'9", he was quick as a cat. And his only thing that held him back in his early days was his ability to talk, his ability to do promos. And Vince knew that. That's why he didn't talk. He just give him the gimmick. And there is a rumor that's been floating around wrestling circles for years that said Vince, when he invented The Undertaker through Mark, he invented his self-image of himself. Like the guy who doesn't feel pain, and he's never going to die, and he's always, coming back from the worst things you can give him. So that was almost a self-image of what Vince saw himself. And that was his gimmick. So, if it's his gimmick, he's going to protect it. And he protected it for 20 years at WrestleMania. Didn't Undertaker go 20-0 or 21-0? What was it?
21-0, yeah.
And he never lost. And in my mind, I don't think he should ever have lost. I think I would have kept that record intact. And even though he did lose to Brock Lesnar, I don't even, it may have helped Lesnar, I don't know, but I think people were disappointed. I think they were more disappointed than Undertaker lost than Brock Lesnar beat him. So, but I think Mark, he was great, and he still is. And I remember when I was in WCW with him, he told me that Vince had called him. And he said, what do you think I should do? And I said, well, for what it's worth, you can do what you want to do. But what I would do, he wanted to go to WWE. That was WWF before he went to WCW. And I advised him to go to WCW first. Let Vince see you, because he watches that TV. Let him see you and let him think about, if he had you, what he could do. So I think he was in WCW maybe a year, and then Vince called him up. And Vince said, and Mark didn't go to Stanford to meet Vince. He went to Boca Raton, Florida, to Vince's summer home. And that's where they talked it over. And that's where it was all done. So, and I think Vince looks back and says, you know, that was one of my greatest inventions. You know, another invention he wanted that he didn't get, he told Jerry Lawler on a plane one day, he said, well, I don't think he cussed him, but he said, damn you, Lawler. He said, if you hadn't have got Andy Kaufman when you did, I would have had him. Because Andy Kaufman wanted to go to New York first. He wanted to go to that old territory. That's what he grew up watching. And the old man, Vince's father, was still alive, and Vince's father put the kibosh to it and didn't bring him. And then he said every time he would see, like he would see him on the Letterman show, or he would see something, but he got eyeballs. Kaufman got eyeballs on the product and on Memphis, and it helped Lawler tremendously. So, and he says he could almost kicked himself in the butt for letting Memphis get Kaufman before the WWF got him. And you know his checks in Memphis that they paid him, and I know they didn't pay him that well, but he never cashed them.
Wow.
When he died, they found the uncashed checks. He had them. He just never cashed them in. Crazy, huh?
Absolutely.
And he was a good guy. And when he was in the dressing room, he almost, you know, you can't hide being a fan. And he was a big fan, and he'd sit over in the corner and he'd just look around, and he didn't try to hi-hat anybody. And half the wrestlers kind of knew him. I knew who he was. I didn't realize how big a star he was. But he looked, being in that dressing room, was almost better than. Hang on 1 minute. I'm running my daughter off here. She's on the phone. But he was as happy to be in the dressing room with us as I guess Vince would have been as happy to have him up there. But that's an old story I just thought I'd throw in. But he was a wrestling fan, and he was just great at it. And this is one of the things I did in Memphis. I expressly told anybody that would know what was going to happen between Lawler and Kaufman, don't tell me. Do not tell me, because I wanted to look at it like a fan. So I went out the night they carted him out. I didn't know all this stuff either. So I'm looking in the ring, and I'm seeing a guy. He was the most unlikeliest guy to ever main event a show anywhere. He was 160 pounds. He was pasty white with pimples, greasy dark hair. He had on long johns and a pair of just black kind of running shorts, I guess, and some tennis shoes on. And he was the most unlikeliest candidate of all time to main event, even an independent show. But only one thing qualified him to be in that ring that night. He sold 11,270 tickets. So that's why he was there. But I never wanted to know what they were going to do. I didn't even know what they wanted to say or anything. And I just told them I want to look at it like a fan, which I did.
Makes sense. Thank you for that story. One quick question before we go to the next category is, you mentioned celebrities, you mentioned Kaufman. Were you around when they got Pamela Anderson to WWF, and did that get a lot of eyeballs as well?
Pamela.
From Baywatch?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. What's her last name? Anderson?
Anderson, yeah.
Yeah, I was on a WrestleMania and she was there. Oh, that did. They got a lot of eyeballs. She was very nice. You know, most of the people they bring in her, they all know that we're entertainers. So we're not best buddies, but I didn't know her. Most of the wrestlers didn't know her. But they would come in and they would meet her, and they would talk to her just briefly. And, one celebrity I never met that I was dying to meet was, what's her name? She was in Golden Girls, Betty
White.
Betty White. Yeah. I grew up on her, kinda, but she's always been in something. And she was elderly then, and they tried to tell us don't bother her too much. And I said, okay, I respected that. But that was the only one I didn't meet that I really, really wanted to meet. I didn't do it. And as far as Anderson, yes, she got a lot of talk about that WrestleMania she was on.
Fantastic. Let's go right to the next category. And the category is the comeback of the year. Would you say the best comeback of 2021 was CM Punk? Was it Becky Lynch? Was it Brock Lesnar, who returned without Paul Heyman? Was it Christian, who was told he'll never wrestle and he came back to AEW? Or was it W. Morrissey or Big Cass?
Who was the last one? Big Cass?
Yeah. So he returned as W. Morrissey in Impact.
I'm going to go with Brock because I think that I'm more familiar with him. And CM Punk, he's a very close second. But I think Brock took it, and I think he wins that category.
You mentioned how Hulk Hogan was not on the show every week, and that made him special. Do you think they are trying to do that thing with Brock so much more than Roman?
And I think that does help Brock. Because anytime you would see Hogan or anytime you would see Brock on free TV, they were setting up an angle, which you said, and when you don't see a person that much, you can't get burnt out on them. But I mean, see, I'm a SmackDown expert, kind of by now. And like I said, you could almost pick who's going to face who and in what segment. And when they come out, you go, oh, God, again, please give me a break. And that's what I like about AEW more, because they put guys on there that I don't know. And they're pretty damn good. Some of them are. So when they put them on like that, and that's the way we used to have to get over in wrestling, because people didn't know you. But after, it only takes a week or two. And then you're known. So, and AEW does a good job on that. But I'm going to pick Brock as comeback of the year.
Fantastic. Let's go to male wrestler of the year. Is it Roman Reigns? Is it your old friend Big E, who became WWE champion after a very long time? Is it Bryan Danielson? Is it CM Punk? Or is it Kenny Omega?
Well, I'm going to have to go with Roman again. I think because he's featured on every show and either at the front or the back. I think he refuses to go on in any other spot except front and back. So if he's not in one of those slots, and they know that's why they put him on front and back mostly. If they can give them another reason, he'll accept that, I guess. I don't know. But I'm going to have to go with Roman as what was that category? Male wrestler?
Male wrestler of the year. Male wrestler of the year.
I'm going with him.
And finally, the tag team of the year. Would you say it was Randy Orton and Riddle, otherwise known as RK Bro? Would you say it was the New Day? Would you say it was the Lucha Brothers from AEW? Would you say it was Gallows and Anderson, or the Good Brothers from Impact Wrestling? Or would you say it was the Uso Brothers from SmackDown?
The Usos, because they put on such good matches. I mean, these guys, see, tag team wrestling is an art form. I mean, wrestling is an art form. But their stuff is so smooth and so crisp. Plus, they don't slow down. and they're part of that family legacy anyway. And I think the Usos, I think they win Tag Team of the Year. The New Day, I don't even think they're even close to they're good, but I don't think they match up to the Usos.
Okay, so you have worked with the Samoan dynasty for a long time, I think. Rikishi was presented very differently to the way the current lot of Samoans are presented. Do you think that this serious look is better for the whole Samoan dynasty than, Rikishi with his backside in people's faces and everything?
Well, he was a big guy. But he was entertaining, and I think Kiss My Backside is just another part of him. But I do like the serious side of those guys, because even in real life, not to make a Samoan mad. Because I've known some of them, and they're all great guys, all of them, and very friendly till they start this. Oh my God! If I ever saw that, I'd go, time for me to leave, and I take off, because if you make them mad, you can't stop them. That's just they're just tough people. They grew up tough, and they grew up in the family, and they have family values, and they respect people. Till you disrespect them, and then it kicks in. So, and I've always been able to be one that could pick out potential problems later on in the night. I walked in several bars, and it just didn't feel right. I could feel tension in the air, and I'd say, whoop. Then I'd hear the night after, man, you left. They had one hell of a fight there. I said, well, good. I'm glad I wasn't there. So, but those guys are good. They're really, really good guys, and tough too. Very tough.
Fantastic. Were you around Haku, and was he the toughest guy that you know?
Haku?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't around him that much, but I was around him enough. But if you just met him, you'd say, well, what a nice guy. Because he was very respectful, and yes, sir, no, sir. And you would never have known he was so tough just talking to him. Because he's even has a soft voice, kind of. And you never know. The old saying, you got to watch them. They're quiet. You ever hear that? The quiet ones are the meanest. Well, right. That's true with the Samoans. They don't go out there and holler and scream and carry on. Look at me. And they actually try to avoid it till it gets to where they can't, or they get to tipping that bottle too much. They don't care. So, but Haku, it doesn't surprise me that he is the toughest guy I probably ever met, because I've heard stories. I wasn't there. I think he beat up 3 or 4 guys at one time. Anybody that can do that's pretty tough. So I don't want to cross paths with them.
Absolutely. So before we wind up the interview part of this conversation, we have a quick rapid fire, and because you have booked for so many great wrestlers over the years, I will throw a name at you. Could you tell me if there is a certain guy from today that reminds you of that person?
Okay.
Can I? Jerry Lawler.
Well, he's. See, I can never make an answer short. I just can't. But I think Omega maybe, because he has good timing, and he knows where to put stuff in. I would say Omega to him. What made Lawler so great? No move was wasted, and there was a time for it, a reason for it, and everything he did had a reason. Jake the Snake was another one. Nothing was wasted. Everything meant something. Okay, I'll say Omega. R. Danielson.
R. Danielson. Okay. So Kane, Glenn Jacobs. Who reminds you of Glenn Jacobs?
Well, there's another one. Maybe Luchasaurus, maybe.
Wow.
Because he just needs more timing. I mean, he just needs more experience. I would say Keith Lee. He could probably work into that. He'd have to slow down. Did you see the bill that he gave that guy on AEW? He threw him almost out of the ring.
Right.
You know, he did that wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong, but he hooked him like this. Hooked him right here. I tried to do that to an old timer one time. He stopped and slapped me. And I got back to the dressing room, and I knew I'd done something wrong. He said, "Don't ever try to bill me with that under my arm." He said, all we're going to do is I'm going to go up a little bit, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to land on my hip and spin. He said, I can't take many of those because I'll probably break my hip. See, the way you do it, I'll tell anybody this, you hook the whole arm underneath him. This is in his armpit right here. And when you throw him, you do that. And if he'd have done that, he would have thrown him completely out of the ring, I think. But see, that's what they teach at NXT.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, well, who taught those guys? That's a basic move, a basic maneuver that they get wrong. I think another thing they get wrong is an arm drag. I mean, even though it might look good and it's done quick, still the wrong way. You know who taught me how to take an arm drag? Old timer named Gypsy Joe.
Okay.
He said, and Gypsy was a Puerto Rican guy, and he talked funny. He said, yeah, you go up, you lock up to the guy, and you put your hand right here, your left hand behind his neck, and wherever he goes, just take the bump. And I did it because if you're hooking arms, I've heard of several cases guys break their arms because the mat is loose and they slip. So, but NXT, they've never called me, so I guess my teachings just have to be online now.
They may call you. They may call you after this interview.
They say, well, why you saying that stuff is wrong? I said, well, it is wrong. See, but I can't believe the guys who've gone through there, even the trainers that didn't correct that. Tom Pritchard is one. Tom knows. I don't know why they never did it that way. I don't know. But they never called me to come in and do anything. So maybe this is an appeal to them. Hey, you got two moves wrong, so call me and I'll correct it.
Okay. Next one, someone you were instrumental in booking, Kurt Angle. Is there
Who's that, Kurt Angle?
Yeah.
Somebody that reminds me of him?
Yes, sir.
In today's group? Well, he is probably Danielson.
Okay.
Because the thing with Kurt, things made sense. Things had a basis to it and a base. So even if you saw Kurt wrestle in a match, if he threw some amateur stuff in there, well, you couldn't say, well, this doesn't look as set up and contrived as they would lead me to believe. But I would say Bryan Danielson with Kurt, if you had another one.
So 2 more to go, and then we wind up the interview. Stinger. Is there somebody who reminds you of Sting from today's generation?
Well, Stinger is a unique case because Stinger is basically all gimmick. He doesn't really. He has a hold he puts on. And here's an old story about Sting. Well, I guess you could use Darby Allin because Darby does try to copy him. But Sting is all gimmick. They come up with him because he wasn't a good talker. Sometimes he could do a decent promo. That's the best he's ever done. But they just put guys in front of him that he just beat and he beat and he beat and he beat. And I don't think he could tell you today other than what I just said of how he got over, because they put him over, and he had a good looking out, the white painted face and the designs and all, and so a good looking, good body. But probably who helped him more than anything else was Flair. Flair took him to these 30-minute matches, these 30, 40-minute matches. And Sting never, I bet he has yet to even suggest anything, because they just did what Flair told him to do. And here's a good story for you. Flair drew a ton of money with Sting. And Flair drew a ton of money with Luger.
Right.
So the brains in WCW said, I got a great idea. What is it? Tell me. What if we put Stinger and Luger against each other? Wow, great idea. So they did it. You know what they got? Crickets. Wow. Oh, it was actually embarrassing. And I'll tell you why it was embarrassing. You didn't have a leader, and they liked both of them. And no matter who won, the loser's side, they'd be disappointed. And you don't want to disappoint fans, because I don't call them fans necessarily, I call them customers. So you want those customers coming either because they're excited or they're happy. And when you kill half your fan base off in one night, you don't kill it, but you don't help it. It's not a good thing to do. And whoever decided to put two baby faces together, unless they had a plan for one of them to turn heel, which they didn't, I think they just they hurt themselves.
The final name that I'll throw at you, somebody you know very well, JBL. Is there somebody from today that reminds you of JBL?
Well, let me see. JBL was a brawler. Man, he'd be out in the crowd, or not necessarily in the crowd, because WWE, they don't want you, or WWF, they don't want you going in the crowd. I can see why. But I don't think I see anybody right now that reminds me of JBL that much, because WWE holds them back. And I think sometimes I watch AEW, it's all fighting everywhere. So nobody really stands out in AEW because they're fighting outside the ring, because they all fight outside the ring. I saw one show one night, it looked like the first match, it looked just like the last match. I mean, they were just all over the place. So I don't have an answer for that one. Not right off the top of my head.
Absolutely. So you guys have heard Dutch Mantell's picks. It's time for you to go vote and pick your choices for the 2021 Sportskeeda Wrestling Awards. Thank you so much, Dutch, for your time. We appreciate we appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.